Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Julie Zuckerman, the author of the Book of Jeremiah, and welcome to the June Literary Modiin author event. May. We're still in May. Before we get started, let me say a few words of introduction. For those of you who aren't familiar, Modiin is a planned city in Israel, halfway between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, right near the airport, which is open and very busy and very crowded. I was just there last week a few times, so come visit. In Literary Modiin, we started this 3 years ago because we have a large population of English speakers here. So in June 2019, I started as a way to bring local Israel-based authors to the large community of English readers. And we're actually excited tonight because Rachel Barenbaum was one of those first authors we had at our first event, and she's back with us today with her second novel. Anyway, we held several in-person events, but when the pandemic hit, we switched to virtual, which allows us to hear from authors from all over and to welcome attendees from all over the world. Today's event is our 24th. And next week, actually, for those of you who are local, we're going to have an in-person event next Sunday. So you can register to come. It's at my house. So you'll see, hopefully not this room, hopefully just the garden, but where we're going to have 3 other authors with us. For those of you who are new, the format of the event is that each author will speak for 15 minutes, and then we open it up for questions after all 3 authors have gone. But you can put questions or comments throughout the presentation in the chat box. And if you have any technical difficulties, you can just send a private note in the chat to me. As I said, we're broadcasting live on Facebook and Literary Modiin, so feel free to start a watch party. So let me introduce our first author. Rachel Barenbaum is the author of the critically acclaimed novels Atomic Anna and A Bend in the Stars. She's a prolific writer and reviewer. Her work has appeared in the LA Review of Books, the Tel Aviv Review of Books, and more. She is a scholar in residence at the Hadassah Brandeis Institute at Brandeis and is the founder and host of the podcast Debut Spotlight. In a former life, she was a hedge fund manager and spin instructor. She has degrees from Harvard in business and in literature and philosophy. She's an elected member of town meeting in Brookline, Massachusetts. I did not know that before today. Anyway, Rachel, take it away. I will now spotlight you.
Oh, Julie, thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here on a Sunday. And I just want to say this is so exciting for me to be here because my very first book event ever as a published author was live in Modiin. And so it's kind of amazing and surreal to be back here for Atomic Anna. So thank you so much for having me. Some of you might remember that I talked a lot about with Bend in the Stars, my 2 great aunts that I grew up with. They were always at my house. My grandmother died when I was very young. And so her sisters sort of took her place and were always at my house and always drinking our Manischewitz and always, smelling like herring. But I loved them very much. And they would always tell me to make sure that I had my passport ready, that I was ready to run. So I spent a lot of time with these great aunts. And in April of 1986, I sat down with them to watch the nightly news. And I, of course, had to adjust the antenna because there was static. And you guys might remember, some of you might remember those days of broadcast television. And the news comes on. And that night, they're broadcasting the news, the breaking news that the Chernobyl power plant has melted down. And the fallout is going to be horrific, casualties unknown, but likely enormous. And I just sat there, this massive moment for me thinking, oh my God, the grownups can really mess up. I was a little girl. And my one aunt, she turns to her sister and she says, if there had been a woman in charge, this never would have happened. And that moment clicked as a moment in my childhood that I have always carried with me. And so when I sat down to write my second novel, what would become Atomic Anna, I was obsessed still with Chernobyl, with what had happened, the tragedy, and always thinking about these aunts, always carrying them with me. And so this leads me to my main character, Anna Burkova of Atomic Anna. And she is a brilliant Jewish chief engineer at Chernobyl. She is the woman that my aunts, wanted to see. This one thing they agreed on, if only it had been a woman there. So Atomic Anna opens the night of the Chernobyl disaster when Anna is working on an amplifier for the reactor and the plant melts down. And this device that she's working on, this amplifier, accidentally turns into a time machine. And it sends her forward onto a mountaintop in Armenia, where she finds her estranged daughter, Molly. Molly's dying. She's been shot in the chest. And she turns to her mother. They haven't seen each other in years and decades. And she says, "We failed again. You need to go back again and build your time machine and try again." And Anna realizes that she has a choice. She could save her daughter, or she could stop Chernobyl. And in the abstract, right, I think it might be easy for us to say this is a clear choice. If she stops Chernobyl, she's saving countless lives versus the one of her daughter. But in that moment, when she is sitting there holding her dying daughter, when she is bleeding to death in front of her, I don't know that the choice is so easy to make, right? And so this is where we start. What should she do? So Anna shoots back to 1986, and we dive into Atomic Anna, the novel, which is a sweeping generational saga that tells the story of Anna's life, how she started out, right? She lived through Russia, the revolution, to Nazi Germany, and then back to the Soviet Union, how she becomes the chief engineer at Chernobyl. It's the story of her daughter's life, Molly, who she sends off to America to be raised by her best friend. Molly becomes a comic book artist. And it is the story of Molly's daughter, Raisa, who grows up to become a math prodigy, a genius. And in fact, the one person who can help Anna in the end, who can help her solve the equations that she needs to solve in order to build her time machine. These three women come together and they have to decide, should we do it? Should we build this time machine? The book is packed with adventure, Jewish history, but above all, it is about their love for one another. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I'm going to show you a little bit of some of the images that really influenced the book, and just read a paragraph or two to give you a sense of the writing and what the book is about. This is always that awkward moment before it shares. There we go. Okay, and we're up. So Atomic Anna. So I've already told you that it's about these three generations. So when I started my research and I started looking into this book, I was sort of in the middle of Bend in the Stars. And when you're writing a book, you have this very strange time, right, where you spend all these intensive hours on one book and then you send it off to an editor or an agent and you have like 2 months of crickets, total silence. And so I always fill that time with writing my next book. And so while Bend in the Stars was off being edited during one of these times, I started on Atomic Anna. I was actually living in Israel at the time. And I came across this photo from a pool near the Chernobyl disaster site. And this is in the closed city of Pripyat, which is where most of the people lived that worked at Chernobyl. And this pool I just thought was so terrifying. It's like a haunted pool, right? And it brought me right back to that night sitting with my aunts, adjusting the antenna, watching that TV. And I thought, oh my God, I need to write about this. And the clock in particular that's in the back there has always hit me. So if you're a swimmer, you might remember that when you do laps, when you're doing, right, anything, you might time yourself. You might be told everyone leaves on the 15 or the 30, right? Or, you know, but you'll see this clock in the background, and of course it's stopped. But I've always been obsessed with this question of time. What is time? Why do we use time? Why are we obsessed with it? To see this hulking clock, right? This sort of ghost clock in this picture brought it all together, and in my head mixes into time travel. You realize that's not what everybody, automatically comes to, but in my head, that's where it goes. So this is really sort of what started me off on this thought. And then we go to Armenia, right? Because you might remember that I mentioned Anna shoots forward in time accidentally to the top of a mountain in Armenia. It's Mount Aragats. And she goes to this real life, actual Soviet cosmic ray station. And so I saw this photo essay. It was in National Geographic. It's been in The Guardian, also by the incredible photographer Toby Smith. And he wrote about the Soviets building this cosmic ray station to study cosmic rays, right? What is this energy that's coming down all the time on Earth? And I just thought that place is fascinating, right? People actually climbed up these towers and into those boxes, and there are all sorts of instruments up there and computers. I don't know if you can see, here we go. There's a computer in the background right here. I took a picture. This is what you will see inside those boxes. And I thought that is where my characters are building their time machine. This is where they're hiding out. So this is actually where the book opens. And I'm just going to read the very, very first page to give you a sense of what happens when Anna lies there. So the scientist, Anna Burkova, was asleep in her narrow bed in Pripyat, the closed city that housed workers from Chernobyl. She was cold, but then again, she was always cold. The walls in her building were thin. Damp and wind clawed through cracks, and she huddled under blankets to escape them. She had fallen asleep working on the amplifier she hoped would increase efficiency at the nuclear power plant, the prototype lying on her chest. It was small and crude, a circuit board covered with diodes and capacitors. She didn't hear the explosion or feel the catastrophic shudder as reactor number 4 ripped apart, its insides flayed, releasing the most dangerous substances known to man. Nor did she witness the shock of light that stabbed the dark, because at that exact moment, Anna tore through time. It was her first jump, and it was an accident. When she opened her eyes, she was on her back in the snow, alone on a mountain, clutching the smoking amplifier. And this is where she goes. So this is the beginning and the opening of the novel. And this is what was in my head as I was writing it. This is the scene. So I mentioned also that it doesn't just stay in Armenia or the Soviet Union, right? This is a sweeping family saga. It goes across 3 generations from the Soviet Union all the way to America, to Philadelphia, where I grew up. And these are some photos to sort of remind you and put you in the moment. If any of you have the book, I saw Cheryl had her copy. You don't have to follow along with me, but I was so excited to see her on here holding up her book. This is where my characters Molly, the 2nd generation, and Raisa, so Anna's granddaughter and daughter, grow up in Philadelphia. And on the top left here, this is actually a flea market in the Northeast, where I grew up going and where my characters go, right, every weekend. And they work in a butcher shop. So I'm just going to read the very first paragraph here describing this neighborhood, and really where a huge chunk of the novel also takes place. This is in September of 1987. When Raisa was 16 years old, she had been living with her grandparents for 6 years in a slice of Northeast Philly they called Little Russia. The streets were lined with row homes, separated by walls so thin there was no privacy, and invisible borders so thick she didn't need to use a word of English until she stepped into a classroom at school. She never saw her mother because she'd been told she was still in prison, and Raisa refused to visit. Papa was long dead, and now Raisa passed every waking hour either at school or with her grandparents working at their store, the Russian market. She oscillated between the 2 worlds on a schedule set by the school bell and a pair of church bells recorded in Moscow that blared on the Russian radio station her grandmother played at all hours. So the Russian market, the butcher shop in the book, is kind of like what you see in these other 2 pictures here, right? The hanging salamis, right? The old-fashioned paper, sort of the butcher shop that I grew up with, that my characters live in and work in and own in America. And this is the bridge back to Anna there, right? The 1st generation in the Soviet Union. So I mentioned a little bit that there are also comic books in here. And the middle generation, Molly, is, right, so this is Anna's daughter, is a comic book artist. And these are her comic book characters. And she's a lonely child growing up, right? She knows that her mother has refused her in her head, pushed her away to adoptive parents. And so she spends her time imagining what her mother would have been like, what their team would be like as superheroes. And so the 3 main characters that she draws and dreams of are Rocket Raisa, Mighty Minerva, and Atomic Anna, of course. And these comic books actually become a bridge to each generation. And she uses them to pass them off to, right, to get messages between Anna and Raisa and to bring the family back together. And I had the great fortune of being able to work with a couple of artists that helped me bring to life these characters that I had dreamed of and put them in here. And why comic books? Why do they play such a big part in this book? Well, these characters are growing up in the 70s at the heart of second wave feminism. Sadly, this is also right in the forefront now again, right? Where figures like Bella Abzug, Shirley Chisholm, right? Gloria Steinem were fighting for women's rights, right to choose, right to have a bank account, right? Right for anything. And this moment is captured in comic books more than anywhere else. And I use these comic books to show that fight. Up until this moment, most women in comic books were thrown into refrigerators. I know that sounds so crazy, but they were thrown into refrigerators and fighting over men. And then women like Trina Robbins came out and said, we are going to change the way we talk about women. And we're doing that first through comics. And so my character, Molly, embraces that second wave feminism and is a feminist through her comic books also. And so you will see this comic book art, which I absolutely adored and which I use as another way to reinforce these strong Jewish women in the book. So here we go. They're a little bit animated. Here are some more of the characters. So as Molly gets older, her characters change, and you can see they get a little bit more mature because she's drawing them as a teenager and then as an adult. And you see these adult comics, very different from the ones in the last slide, right? And then we actually made some mock covers here. So that was also really exciting and fun to do. Julie, do I have another minute or two? Where am I on timing?
I forgot to set my timer when you started, but I think you have like maybe 1 or 2 minutes next.
Okay, so I will just read very, very quickly then one paragraph on when Molly realizes that what she wants to do is start drawing her comics and how that comes into the book. You do not have to be a comic lover to love this book, but it is more the medium to think of this as, right, the second wave feminist expression of becoming a woman and a strong woman in control of your own destiny. So Molly says, when her tears were gone, she looked up at the webbed cracks in the ceiling, 100 lines crooked across the old plaster, and she remembered the comic books from the baker. Molly pulled her flashlight out from under the corner of her mattress and began reading. Mary and her twin brother, Captain Marvel, were separated at birth. At the age of 12, they were reunited, and Mary realized her superpowers. While both used the same word, Shazam, to invoke these powers, her brother's powers came from Solomon, Hercules, Atlas, Zeus, Achilles, and Mercury, right? Shazam. While Mary's came from Selena, Hippolyta, Ariadne, Zephyrus, Aurora, and Minerva. A comic book with a powerful girl at the center and all kinds of superhero adventures took her mind off the anger. Molly read page after page after page. And so begins. So that is the very quick sort of overview of where Atomic Anna is. And I will leave you with that to these two other amazing authors and we can hear from them. So thank you so much for having me, Julie. And thank you everyone for taking time out today to listen.
Thank you, Rachel. That was great. I love the comics. I love the book. So I hope everybody who's here will read it. Okay, I'm on to introduce our next author. Elan Barnehama's second novel, Escape Route, is set in New York City during the late 1960s. His writing has appeared in Boston Accent, Jewish Fiction, Drunk Monkeys, Writer's Digest, HuffPost, the New York Journal of Books, Public Radio, and elsewhere. At different times, he has taught writing and literature, was the fiction editor at Fourth Magazine LA, worked with at-risk youth, was a ghostwriter for a university president, coached high school varsity basketball, had a gig as a radio news guy, and did a mediocre job as a short order cook. He is a New Yorker by geography, a Mets fan by default, but he now lives in Newton, Massachusetts, right down the road from Rachel. So, Elan, take it away. I'm gonna get you to unmute. And
hi, I am unmuted, I hope. Yeah. So here's a copy of the book. It's called Escape Route. So I grew up in Queens, in New York, and my parents, part of the influence of this book is my parents left Berlin and my father left Vienna after their Kristallnacht. They ended up in Haifa and Jerusalem, where they lived for a while. My father, for instance, changed his name from Leo, as many Germans and Austrians did. It was Leo Winschauer. He changed Leo being lion to Aryeh, And Barnehama is son of Nechama. He took his mother's name, and he has a bunch of reasons why, but he wanted to run for office. And if he took his father's name, it would have been Ben Tzvi, and that would have been like Smith in Israel, and it wouldn't have helped him running for office. He ended up getting polio, as very, very few people in Israel did at the time, and being sent to New York after the War of Independence and worked for the Israeli government there. And we had many trips to Israel. So the book has a lot of biographical, but not autobiographical, because as all the other writers here know, it's a lot more fun to make stuff up, and it's a lot more fluid. The facts don't always make for good stories. So the book is about Zach, who was, as Julie said, is a first-generation son of Holocaust survivors. And it's also the Vietnam War is raging at the time. That takes place in 1968. And, so he, and Rachel mentioned passports, and we only met today, but there's a scene also about keeping passports by the door. So it was fun to hear you mention that. It seemed to be a thing at the time. So Zach meets this young woman named Sam, and I'm always interested in what happens away from the spotlight. History is made by not just leaders, but by people. And we kind of all show up at these moments of history without knowing it. You're just born into it. And sometimes it's tragic. Imagine if you're born in Ukraine today. And so we're all sort of like thrown into middle of history. It doesn't just moments of fluid. And so I was kind of interested in this idea of collaborating in history. So he's got the Holocaust in the back of his mind, and he feels responsible for finding a way to get out of New York when they decide, the US decides it's time to get rid of its Jews. And at the same time, thinking that he's nearing draft age for the Vietnam War, which is raging and doesn't seem to have an end. So he and his friends go to protests. He meets a young woman named Sam, who her brother just came back from Vietnam with PTSD, and they get involved with a bunch of veterans who actually have a sort of secret camp on Ellis Island, which at the time was deserted before they rebuilt it. And they just sort of navigate, politics and hope and friendship, and really above all friendship. I'm addicted to the idea of chosen family. We have blood family, but I think chosen family is really interesting. There's absolutely no reason to hang out together and to have each other's back, and yet we do. I have a group of friends who my kids call uncle, and their kids cousins, and we have no blood connection. So that being said, I'm going to read a little bit from the beginning of the book, and then later there's questions and answers. Zach's, this is the night before his bar mitzvah, is where the book opens, and his sister is coming. Sister is named Allie, and his best friend is named Jonah, and a few other characters. So chapter 1, the times they are changing. Revolution is in the air, Allie said, and it smells good. She was leaning against my bedroom door the night before my bar mitzvah. I was in my room practicing for my part of the service. It was Allie's first visit back home since she left for Columbia University. She hadn't even come back for the high holidays, and my parents had not mentioned that she was coming back. Likely she didn't tell them, just showed up, and I was glad she remembered. You ought to get some posters in here. Allie wandered aimlessly around the room, and her mind appeared to be wandering too. Posters, I asked? Anything, Dylan, Hendrix, Mao. Mao? I reached for a t-shirt on my floor, slipped it on, and then stuffed The Crying of Lot 49 under my mattress, so Allie wouldn't quiz me about it. It was her copy. I had borrowed it from her shelves, and even though I hardly understood anything I was reading, it was the best damn thing I'd ever read. Not Che, Allie said, Jim Morrison. Why not Che? How about Seaver? Very funny, she said. You were always funny. I wasn't trying to be funny. I didn't even know what was funny. What's this crap you're listening to, Zach? She sat next to me, her brown hair, woven in a braid, reached all the way down to my mattress. Jonah, my neighbor and my best friend since always, had gotten a giant crush on her, which she insisted on telling me about in great detail, no matter how many times I told him that I preferred he keep his creepy thoughts about my sister to himself. You've got to change the station, Allie said. Change it to what? I asked. Zach, Allie said abruptly. I waited for her to continue, but she didn't say a thing. It was like she had a point and she kept losing it. Zach, she said again. This time she looked at me. You're becoming a man tomorrow, so you may as well grow up. Okay. I was not following what she was talking about. And then she leaned across me and flipped the white dial on my brown plastic transistor radio from AM to FM. What does the radio have to do with my bar mitzvah? I asked. Stop talking, Zach. Just listen. Just listen, she repeated. The DJ, Paul Jacobs, was talking calmly. He read from a list of meetings and gatherings and happenings around New York. He mentioned places I'd never been to and causes I'd never heard of. Then Jacobs put on a record and dropped the needle on Dylan. My mind exploded as it tried to wrap itself around being maps, ideas being used as maps. Each line cried out with consequence, and I raced to try and keep up with every word. Lies and jealousy and mutiny and equality. Dylan spoke those words like they were wedding vows with greater understanding than I could gather. And when the song ended, I was feeling much younger than before Allie walked into my room. I leaned back, exhausted, as Paul Jacobs introduced Phil Oakes. I'd never heard of Phil Oakes. There was so much more happening here, with so much less noise than the AM/FM station that Allie had muted. I was wondering, how did I not know that this other world had existed inside my radio all along? And then I'm just going to read another paragraph from a little later in the novel. And Jonah and Zach had been down at the ballpark getting high, and they came back to his house and they had the munchies and raiding the refrigerator. Jonah made a chocolate egg cream, grabbed some newspaper, and sat next to me. I looked up. What? I had no idea how long I'd been staring at the paper, and I couldn't remember what we were talking about. I was focused on the AAA ad. It was a sign. It was so obvious. This was my part. I needed to find the open road. I needed to be ready to help my family escape when the U.S. decided it was time to round up its Jews. That was what my grandfather was trying to tell me. That was why he kept his passport by the door for me to see. It had been a year since my bar mitzvah, and I had not come up with a single idea as to what my part would be. And what my part now was right in front of me. I needed to know every road and every path out of the neighborhood. I needed to find an escape route for my family. I needed to be prepared. I needed to be ready. And I thank you, Julie, and I'll let you pass it on to Haviva. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thanks, Elan. That was great. That was great. Okay. Haviva Ner-David is an ordained rabbi and interfaith interspiritual minister with a doctorate in philosophy and an MFA in creative writing. Quite a combination for you. She runs Shmaya, a mikveh for mind, body, and soul, where she officiates ritual immersion ceremonies and offers group workshops. A certified spiritual director with a specialty in dream work, she works with individuals and couples. In addition to dreaming against the current, Haviva is the author of a novel, Hope Valley, which she spoke about last year. I think it was February Literary Modiin event, February 2021. And she's the author of two other memoirs, Life on the Fringes, A Feminist Journey Towards Traditional Rabbinic Ordination, and Chana's Voice, a rabbi wrestles with gender commandment and the women's rituals of baking, bathing, and brightening. That's a long subtitle. She is involved in peace work, promoting a shared society of Jews, Christians, and Muslims in the Galilee, where she lives with her partner, 7 children, and dog and cat. She also lives with a genetic degenerative muscular disease called FSHD, which has been one of her greatest teachers. So, Haviva, I will now spotlight you and ask you to take it away.
Okay.
And fun fact, Haviva and I know each other from college.
Yeah.
Columbia, and you just mentioned that Allie, your character, or Zach's sister, goes to Columbia. So, yay. Yeah.
Okay. And we're gonna switch. We're going to memoir now, and it's like heavier or whatever. But this is where we are. And I should add another passport thing, which it's not necessarily related to the book, but my name is Haviva. But my name on my passport is Lisa, for the same reason that my parents felt that I shouldn't have such a Jewish name on my passport. So I was never called Lisa, never once in my life, but that's the name on my passport. So there you go. Okay. So I was going to start, well, first of all, the book this is the book, Dreaming Against the Current, A Rabbi's Soul Journey. And it takes place during the 4 years that I was studying at One Spirit, One Spirit Interfaith Interspiritual Seminary in New York. I was a distance learner because I live in Israel. And there's a scene in the book where I'm receiving ordination as an interfaith interspiritual minister. And I just wanted to read, just to open a little tiny part from that. How did a nice Jewish girl from the Orthodox New York suburbs get here today? I ask myself as I prepare for this monumental life step. I remember a writing prompt from a workshop in which I participated. What is the shape of your life? I wrote how I do not think of my life in terms of shapes, rather in terms of water. My life began as a narrow stream feeding into a river, widening slowly until it will one day feed into an ocean. I don't know when that will be, nor what that ocean will look like, but I am certain there will be rapids as well as meandering currents, rocks as well as clear paths, cold as well as warm waters, all moving in one direction and opening slowly but steadily along the way, until one day all flows into the one vast ocean that is the one. So I wanted to read that just as an opening, because the book is very much about expansion, and my life, I feel, also is very much about expansion. So I grew up in an Orthodox home in New York, and I never felt like I quite fit in, and I had a free spirit, but I also wanted approval from the community in which I grew up in, and my family, my parents. So then when I was 16, I was diagnosed with degenerative muscular disease, a kind of muscular dystrophy. And that definitely set me on a path of seeking of what is the meaning of life. Why did this happen to me? And you know, it's not fair. How could this be? And then I struggled with anorexia after that. And the way that I ended up reconciling this free spirit side of me and the side that was looking for approval and also for structure and meaning was I ended up becoming very involved in the Orthodox feminist movement. And I moved to Israel. I was involved with something called Women of the Wall and also the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance. I was also one of the founders of Shira Chadasha, which is an Orthodox prayer community in Jerusalem that really pushes the boundaries of women's participation. And maybe most interestingly, I decided I wanted to become a rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi, but I'm a woman. And so I studied for 10 years with a rabbi, Aryeh Strakowski, Zichrono Livracha. His memory should be a blessing because he actually died yesterday and was buried this morning. So I'm also emotional about that. And so he eventually gave me his private rabbinic ordination in 2006. But when I received the ordination, I realized that I was not Orthodox anymore. And so I started calling myself a post-denominational rabbi. And I moved from Jerusalem to the north to Kibbutz Hanaton and founded this mikveh, the Shmaya mikveh for mind, body, and soul. It's the only mikveh, the only ritual immersion pool in Israel that's open to anyone who wants to immerse, however they want to immerse, whenever they want to immerse. And so you would think that that would be expansive enough. That was, for me, you know, becoming, that was already breaking out of molds that I had grown up with. But then the war broke out in 2014 in Gaza, and there were missiles flying into Israel, and there were bombs in Gaza. And it was a time, a very difficult summer with a lot of, it was hate crime and hate killings. And I felt the country really retreating, people retreating into their kind of narrow spaces. And I personally, the only place that I really felt comfortable was were in spaces that were intercultural, interfaith, and where we be sitting and singing about peace together. And then I went on a book tour and I was in New York for this second memoir. And I spoke, when I was speaking somewhere in New York, and I expressed some of these feelings, someone told me about a place called One Spirit in Manhattan. And I went to go visit. It's an interfaith, interspiritual seminary. And I went to visit and I signed up for their 2-year ministry program that started in September. So this was, I think, in August. And I ended up doing the 2-year program, and it was a transformative experience for me. It was really the question I came with really was, can religion be part of the cure instead of the problem? And I ended up coming out feeling that it could, and that well, I should explain what interspirituality is. The idea is that it's there is no one truth, and that there are all different paths to the summit, as we would say. And I also like to look at it as kind of as like different languages, like different, the way different languages formed around the world. So this is like religions forming around the world, all trying to speak of how we long for the divine. And so I ended up doing that program, and you learn about all the different religions and you do a lot of deep inner work. And at the end of the program, and that's the scene where I'm ordained at Riverside Church in Manhattan. And then I decided that I had really only scratched the surface, and I felt like I really needed to do more inner work. We had been exposed in the program to something called spiritual counseling or companioning or direction. I'll use companioning. And it was really, for me, and I experienced that in this level that it was something that I had felt as growing up in the Orthodox world, that I had never really been seen or heard and felt for who I really am. And that's what it's all about, is holding space for someone and in non-judgment. So I did that program, and that is when I met my dream work teacher. So that's something that the book is about. So this woman, Judith Schaffman, she walked into our class and she taught us about dream work. So the book is very much about dreams and water. So that's dreaming against the current. The book is memoir interwoven with my own dreams, my sleeping dreams, and my working of them. So I'm just going to open the window because it's gotten hot in here. Okay. So I'll explain what dream work is, and I'm going to read a piece from the book of it as well. So dream work, the idea is that we create our own dreams. They're ours. And it's not a surprise to me that this spoke to me so deeply, because if you think about writing, so writing is images and narrative, and that's what our dreams are as well. So the idea is that we create our dreams when we're sleeping. They're a piece of us. And when we're sleeping, what comes up is all the things that in our waking lives we don't let ourselves maybe think or feel. It's the unconscious. So the idea of the dream work is you go back into the dream. The dream worker brings you back into your dream, and the dream worker interviews the elements. You go back into your dream and you become the elements of your dream. You embody them and you speak as them, and that's the way that you find out the messages of your dreams. So, as I said, this was transformative for me. I ended up studying with Jude during those 2 years as well, when I was studying spiritual companioning. So I am now a certified dream worker as well, and I have a spiritual companioning practice and a dream work practice, in addition to the mikveh and my writing. So I want to read this example of a dream, the first one. So when she told us about dream work, now I'm somebody who I had never paid much attention to my dreams. I didn't keep a dream journal or anything like that. And she did a demonstration in class with someone of their dream, doing a dream work with them, and said, and to all of us, if any of you want to work a dream in class, after class, and you have a dream, just email me and we'll get together. And, so on Zoom, it just so happened that night, I had this incredible dream that I just knew had to be a really, really important, significant dream in my life. And as I said, I had never written down dreams before or anything. I emailed her and said, I had this dream, I want to work the dream. So I'm going to read that working of the dream to you right now. And I chose it also, first of all, because it was the first, and second, because it's about expansion. And it's a mikveh dream as well. And a lot of my dreams have mikveh and water in them. Okay. And I'm a water person and I swim every day. I should as well. Okay. So this is the dream. I am the officiating rabbi at a ceremony at Mikveh Shmaya. It is the conversion of a baby, long awaited. Her two fathers are escorting her behind me to the mikveh with a large group of beaming, excited family and friends. The grandmothers are carrying the baby like a precious family heirloom. This is a grandchild they thought they would never have. I sense their mix of fear and pride. They want to do what it takes to make this baby, born to a surrogate non-Jewish mother, a Jewish child. They want to support their sons in this brave effort to create a shared family life, to be a link in the chain of passing on Jewish tradition to future generations. But they are nervous, and they have a right to be. Isn't there a better way to welcome this newborn baby into the Jewish people other than dunking her, head and all, in a cistern of rainwater? We approach the immersion pool, me ahead of the pack. And this is the mikveh, I announce. No need to worry about a thing. The water is warm and clean. I gesture toward the mikveh with an open hand, inviting them to see for themselves. Is there really water in there? One grandfather asks. Of course there is, I say. It's deceptive because we keep the water so clean with this new filter system, but it's in there. And then I look inside the immersion pool. My stomach does a double flip. I blink my eyes and look again. I fear this man is correct. There's no water in the mikveh. Stop right there, I hear Jude's voice from outside my covered eyes. I want you to take a few breaths, she continues. That's all it takes. Keep your eyes closed. Stay with the dream. But now I want you to move outside the role of the dreamer. I want you to become the water. Say, I am the water. I am the water, I repeat, from the deep, dark place to where I have gone, back into this dream from the night before. Now describe yourself to me, water, I hear Jude say. I imagine myself as water. I become water. I am flowing, I say. I am clear. I am free. And why did you leave us? Why did you leave the mikveh? Jude asks. I know the answer. Feel it. After all, I am the water. I did not want to be there. I did not want to be confined in that vessel. I did not want to be used in that way. I hear the excitement in Jude's voice. She knows we are onto something big. So where then are you now? Where have you gone? She asks me. I am elated by her question. It feels like a question I have been wanting to ask myself, to answer, to know the answer to for quite some time. I've gone back to my source, I hear myself say. You've gone back to your source? And where is that? Jude probes. Where are you exactly? I am everywhere. I am in everything, permeating everything, I answer. Jude takes a moment, letting me be in that state of ubiquity that is the source. How does it feel to be back at your source? For a moment, I am afraid. I can't find myself. But then the fear turns into calm. I am not lost, just everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It doesn't feel good or bad. It just is. Great, it just is. Can you stay with that feeling for a few moments? Yes, I say, and I sit with what is. I don't know for how long I do, but I sit with what is. I am what I am. I will be what I will be. I sit with that. And then I feel a sudden rush, a nudge forward. I cannot stay there any longer. I'm coming back, I say. I feel it urgently, this push, this need to return. But I won't fit into the mikveh this way. No, you won't. You've been back to the source. Now return to your dreamer role. What is the dreamer seeing? And then I am back in the story of the dream. I convince the family to get something to eat and come back later after I refill the mikveh. But when we come back to the mikveh building, water is pouring out of the windows, the door. It's flowing down the path, overflowing into the whole kibbutz. It's flooding the place. People are being lifted and carried away. Are they drowning? Are they alarmed? Jude asks. I don't think so. Now I want you to be one of those people. I am the baby who came to be converted, I say, knowing that this baby, like all of the elements of my dreams, is part of my unconscious. But now I am being uplifted in a different way. People thought they were making me Jewish, but it seems that is not what is happening here. Something more expansive is happening. How does it feel? I hear Jude ask me. I'm not sure, I answer. I shift in my chair, try to get some clarity. I don't know where I'm going, but I think I feel fine to be in that place of not knowing. I feel buoyed, I feel safe. I'm floating, not drowning. Can you stay with that feeling of floating with destination unknown without anxiety or fear? I think I can, I say, and I let myself float to wherever the water wants to take me. When an unsettled feeling starts to creep up on me, I push it away as if it has come to the wrong place, as if it does not belong here in my dream. I hear Jude's voice again from far away. I'm not sure how much time has passed. And now I want you to be the water again. Say, I am the water. I am the water, I say. Water, why did you come back? Jude asks. I take a deep breath, drop further down into embodying the water in my dream. I had to. I couldn't stay at my source. I needed to come back to be felt, to be seen, to do what I was meant to do here, but not confined to the mikveh. I couldn't make myself fit into that container anymore. I am so much larger than that, so much vaster, so much more free flowing. I need more room. One thing I just want to say, I see I'm around out of time, just to say it's important for you to say that the book is not a dogmatic book, and it's not saying like this is the way you all need to be and you all need to be free and flowing. It's really just an invitation to do your own inner work, to listen to what your soul is telling you. So, yeah.
Thank you, Haviva. That's great. Very interesting. I'm going to add spotlights for all the writers here. And while I'm doing that, you guys can put any questions you have in the chat box. Let's see. In the meantime, I'll start with a question for all of you, which is, what are you working on now, writing wise? If you're
Well, just for time's sake, I'll jump in. I'm working on two very different books. One is a new novel. I've been working on it for a while. I never know if I'm 70% done or 20% done. And it's basically, somebody runs the Boston Marathon and finishes about 20 minutes before the bombs go off, and then just changes his life. And the other one is it's actually a nonfiction book about a friend of mine who grew up, sort of low, moderate means, shared bedrooms with a sibling, and ended up being very, very wealthy by being generous and good. I mean, he had a competitor, and when the competitor had a heart attack, he sent his son to run his business for him, and just sort of like how his philosophy on business, that just seemed, he's actually one of the people acknowledged on the front page of my book. So it's just kind of a fun story about how to be successful and good at the same time. But so I'm working on two very different projects, and short fiction too.
Rachel, what about you? You already probably wrote your third book, I'm sure. It's probably at the editor now.
So I'm not ready to talk about the next novel, but this fall I will be starting a new short story project at Brandeis, at the Hadassah Brandeis Institute. It's a series of 6 short stories, and each story highlights a Jewish woman who was part of the Russian Revolution, either by being an assassin, a bomb maker, or a woman who hosted one of the safe houses for those who assassinated the Tsar. So that's a really fun project I'm looking forward to digging into this fall.
So you're going to be writing those, you already know the 6 women you're going to be writing about?
Yeah. So they've supported it, right? So I'm coming in as a, I guess, scholar in residence, they call it. And so, just have to write those stories this fall. That'll be really fun.
Very cool. Very cool. Haviva, what about you?
So I'm working on a new novel, and I think it's more like 70 than 20. And it's actually, so this novel is about a woman who, it takes place in Israel, but she had moved to Israel from the States, and when she was right out of high school. And this novel, the next one, takes place, it's also a woman who moved, well, she also moved to Israel when she was right out of high school, but this book starts with her on the plane back to the States. Her sister and nephew were found dead in their house in Massachusetts, actually. So here, around in Massachusetts, and she was living on a kibbutz and goes back to go through her sister's things, and that's what I'll say about it.
Our audience is very quiet tonight with no questions, no comments in the chat. Come on, guys, wake up. I
can ask Rachel a question just about the comics. Are those in the book too? Like you see or is that something?
They're not in the book.
Okay.
They were projects that I did. So the book goes to bed after you finish copy editing and everything. That was maybe in February. And so there's a long stretch where the book goes out for reviews and everything else. And so during that quiet time, I just thought, this would be, I just had this dream that I would love to see these comics be for real. And so I reached out to a couple of women I know in comics now, and then found through that sort of some new up and coming comic book artists who are interested in doing the sketches. And I love supporting women who are just starting out, and was super excited to have the chance to work on that project with them. So it's really fun.
Okay, Haviva, how do you remember the details of the dreams? That's a question from Andrea. Yes.
Okay, so I keep a journal next to my bed, and as soon as I wake up, I write down the dream. So that's the method, and the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the more you remember. And some people claim that they don't dream, but everybody dreams. You just don't always remember your dreams. So it's just a matter of training yourself to remember them and write them down. And I think though in the writing of the book, when I was reimagining the dreams, I'm sure that there's some embellishment in there too. I don't know what the word would be exactly, but they are my dreams anyway. So if you believe also, and you're talking about time travel, and so like if time is fluid, you're constantly creating and recreating your dreams, and you can work a dream that you had 20 years ago and work it again. You can work it then, and then you can work it 10 years later and 10 years after that, because it's all part of you. But a lot of it is just about writing it down before you get out of bed. Otherwise, sometimes I'll just lose it. If I get up, I think I remember a dream, and I'm going to write it down after I, get the kids out or whatever, and that's it. It's gone. So that's part of the trick, is to write it down while you're in bed.
Yeah, I read I think it was last year, the year before. I think it was in Homeland Elegies. Any of you read that? Where he's also writing down his dreams, and he goes to sleep he tapes a pencil or something to his finger so that he'll be able to write it right away. I hope I'm remembering this correctly. So I tried that a little bit. Also if you move, if you shift, you'll lose it. So you gotta try to stay in the same position and write it down. Okay, Cheryl asked, what are you what are you all reading right now?
Mm.
I love this question. I mean, I like,
Yeah,
Julie knows I devour books all the time. Both of us do. We talk books all the time. So Gall Beckerman's latest, I absolutely love that. He was on here, right?
Nope.
No, not. Oh, so hopefully soon.
Okay.
Lisa Barr, Woman on Fire.
Mhm.
Was she on here yet?
Nope, not yet. Nope.
She's also amazing. That book was so good. And then I just got a copy of Schmutz,
Hmm.
right? Felicia Berliner. So I'm excited to dig into that. So those are 3 great books by 3 amazing Jewish writers that I would highly recommend. Well, I haven't read Schmutz yet, but and for a super fun one, I have to say Matzo Ball. I don't know if any of you guys have read that one yet. That's like a super fun rom-com. You'll read it in a night. It's very good.
Will you put those while everybody else is answering? Will you write those down in the chat for anybody who wants to get your recommendations?
Yes.
Haviva, what about you? What are you reading? Okay.
Well, I just read Morningside Heights. That was I heard him speak on your I'm here on Literary Modiin. I reread a book that I had read a while ago because I thought it reminded me a little bit of the book that I'm writing now, the novel. So it's an Anna Quinlan book, Still Life with Breadcrumbs. I don't know if any of you have you read it. So that's what's coming to my mind at the moment. Otherwise, I'm drawing a blank. I have to go next to my bed and look at the pile that I have next to my bed. But yeah, I've been reading a lot on the Kindle lately too. Living in Israel, that definitely. And I ordered both of your 2 books, but so I also can do it from the library too. That's another thing you can order from on the Kindle from the library. So yeah.
And what about you?
So I'm reading, there's a book called 9192, where this author is Lauren Elkin, and she's making notes on her phone during taking the bus back and forth while she's teaching in Paris. And it's when they had the shootings at the supermarket and at the I'm blanking on the newspaper. Sorry.
Charlie.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting using your phone actually to record rather than to distract. And also reading Harlem Shuffle and a book by Laurie Stone, and also Your Nostalgia is Killing Me, which is a great title, John Weir. So these are just a couple of books. Some other ones, like Haviva said, I'd have to check my nightstand.
Harlem Shuffle is great. I really enjoyed that one. Yeah. And apropos Anna Quinlan, here's a fun story. First of all, she went to Barnard, and my senior year at Barnard, my phone. I wrote a letter to the editor of the New York Times, and she was a columnist there, and they printed it. And my phone rang in my dorm room one day, and I was a senior, and it was Anna Quinlan on the phone calling to thank me for writing the letter to the editor. Yeah, we had a whole nice chat, and she asked me, what am I doing after graduation? I said, I'm going to Israel. And she said, well, if you ever come back from Israel, give me a call. So, and then when my book was coming out, my mother who's here, my mom, who had the great idea of I should approach Anna Quinlan for a blurb. So I did, but she said she doesn't do that kind of thing. But anyway, but she wrote me a very nice note, and I had a good hook to, like, I had to write to her through her publisher or agent or something, but it was a good enough hook that they passed it on. But it was like, made my week for sure when she wrote me. And I am reading, I just read Sea of Tranquility, Emily St.
John Mandel.
Mandel's newest book, which I enjoyed. And I just started Jerks, which is short stories by Sarah Littman, who has been on Literary Modiin, and she's going to be back again for her novel, which is coming out in September. I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but so I'm reading her short stories, and also I have Dara Horn's People of Dead Jews by my bedside, so I'm kind of alternating short story, heavy essay, but all good. Okay, wait, there's more comments in the chat, or is that just your recommendations? Your recommendations. Okay. Okay. Well, I have another question for you all, which is about the research that you had to do. So I'm curious. I know Rachel probably had to do a ton of research. Elan, I'm curious if you also had to do research for your novel, and Haviva, even though it's a memoir, did you have to go and do any research for any of the parts of your memoir? And how do you approach research when you're doing it? Who wants to go first?
Nobody wants to go first. I'll go first. Well, I had to check because it's one thing to be told stories growing up. It's another thing to find out that, they didn't happen or the years were different and things like that. So, I checked on different things that I put in that were historical. I also changed the dates, and there's a lot of songs, and I had to make sure that the songs didn't come out 5 years after the year that I condensed that it only takes place from more or less from Woodstock to Kent State, so 68 to 69, and before that it was a longer spread. Sometimes the research leads to adding a piece of the novel, which is always fun because you can use something. My first novel was kind of based on just reading a short article, and I thought, oh, that would make an interesting story. So it's a lot of fun to do the research because if you're interested in the period, you just find out a lot of things that don't end up anywhere near the book, but they're just really fun to sort of immerse into that time period and stuff. So.
Oh, so Julie, I was thinking of another person that you should have on here because I'm also a total fangirl for so many authors. Julie has shared this, but Steve Schenken has a new book out. He wrote Bomb, which is a YA book about the Manhattan Project, which I read as with my kids and became part of the research for Atomic Anna. And he writes these amazing novels. I think he's a genius and under celebrated. So I would highly recommend his latest, but also Adam Higginbotham's Chernobyl, of course. And I dug into all kinds of, newspaper archives, books about Chernobyl, about the physics of time travel and, gravitational waves, which are how the mechanism by which my characters travel, comic books. And I got to interview real life, Trina Robbins herself, who's the famous woman comic in the book. And, I do tons of research, just tons of reading all the time. And it sort of pours into the book, that way.
Haviva, any research?
So I didn't have to do any research. I mean, I was over those years, right, keeping a file on my computer, and just a lot of the scenes as they were happening, I was writing them. And then I turned it into a memoir after. And I was writing this book while I was doing the novel, this novel. So they were at the same time. And this was like the things that I was making up. And this I had to do research, definitely. But this was really just my life. And for the book that I'm writing now, I've had to do research about the Salem witch trials and also Holocaust stuff, so, and I do love that part, the research part.
Okay, does anybody have other questions, or do you all have other questions for each other?
Oh, not so much a question, but it's great to hear from both of you, all three of you.
So much fun. I just really wish that we were in person.
Yeah, well, here, that's a good segue. I'm going to share my screen for a second and show you the next two events coming up. Next week, we have an in-person literary Modiin event with Gadi Bosen, who's here with us tonight. Hi, Gadi. Sarah Ansbacher and Dina Ellenbogen. So if you are in reasonable driving distance of Modiin or bus or train distance, I would love to see you in person. And then in June, we have Rena Rosner, Michal Lemberger, and Jai Chakrabarti will be speaking to us for our virtual event. 3 very different books, short stories, novel, and 2 novels and short stories. But I'm really excited to hear all of them, and also our authors for next week. So I'm gonna, I'll be sending this tomorrow anyway, but I'll put this in the chat for anybody who wants to jump on the gun and register now. Anyway, thank you. I want to thank Haviva, Rachel, and Elan for being with us tonight, and thank all of you. And have a great night, great day wherever you are, and looking forward to seeing you all at the next events, and hopefully, please God, soon in person.
Yes. Thank you so much, Julie.
Thanks,
And thank
Julie.
you both, Haviva, Elan. It's amazing. So much fun.
Yeah. Thanks.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye from Montreal.
Bye, Cheryl. Thanks. Bye, everyone.